Hello everybody, it's me again. Today we're going to talk about how to create a custom fingerprint for your Comma AI Comma2 with openpilot installed on it. So why would you need to create a custom fingerprint for your car? So if you've gone through the normal procedures for installing Comma2, you've made sure that all the physical connections are good, you've gone through the procedure for typing in the URL and downloading openpilot to your Comma2, and you've rebooted it, and the first thing you see is car unsupported dash cam mode only. So what this is telling you, the Comma2 can't talk to your car's computer, and that's usually because it doesn't have a fingerprint and the ECU firmware settings within the proper configuration files on the Comma2 itself. So in order for it to be able to talk, you have to create those, upload those settings to the Comma2 in the proper files. So in order to do that, we're going to go to openpilot's GitHub page on github.com/commaai/openpilot, and we're going to click on the wiki. Underneath the development, there's a link for fingerprinting your car. And we're going to go to fingerprinting 2.0. Now this says that it officially supports Honda, Toyota, and Hyundai, but that doesn't mean it doesn't support your car or it's not going to work for your car. It's just officially supported for Honda, Toyota, and Hyundai. On step 1, record a drive, it's telling you to drive around the come back and put your car in park and make sure that the data is uploaded. In order for this to happen, you need to have a paired device for your Comma2 so that the Comma AI servers can create an account for you so that you can log into it. I log into it with my Gmail account. So I did have an issue with this initial installation. When you go through the Comma2 installation procedures, it comes up with a 3D barcode that you have to scan with your phone. And when I did that, because I'm outside of America, I'm in Japan, it just did a round robin on me and it took me right back to the 3D barcode and it didn't do anything. So if this happens to you, you don't have to worry about it. Just go to Comma support email address, let them know, or you can go to the Discord webpage, which I have up right here, and click on the hashtag installation help to go into this forum here and put your concerns in there, and the Comma AI staff will get back to you. They were very responsive when I put mine in there, and they were very helpful through my entire process of installing my Comma2. So assuming that you already have a paired account to your Comma2, if you go drive around your neighborhood and you come back, if you're in North America and you have a SIM installed that has cell service, it's going to upload as you're driving. If you don't, and you're outside of the SIM service of what they would normally have for your Comma AI, such as me living in Japan, it's going to work on a Wi-Fi setup. So you have to make sure that your Comma2 is hooked up to your Wi-Fi and that you have signal to where you park your car. So once you have that, it's going to act as a store and forward system. You'll go drive around your neighborhood, park your car, and then it'll upload the data when you're done. So using this link here, I'm going to open this up in a new tab, and you can see here I have my dongle ID, and it's saying that there are 2 uploads accepted. So I'll click on the dongle ID, and then that brings up my route names, and you can click on any of the route names and then the segment, and I just clicked on the first one. And so that's going to bring up the logging data for what your Comma2 saw. All right, and if you go do a Control F and type in car FW, okay, that's going to take you exactly to where you have your firmware version in the log, and you're looking for all of these things all the way down to the next field, which is radar time step. All right, so car firmware equals ESP, EPS, engine, forward radar, and forward camera. And so I'm just going to copy all those things, and I'm going to paste it into a text file so that I can modify them. And then if we scroll down, on the wiki, okay, step 3, find the firmware and then add new firmware versions. So if you haven't messed with command line before, it could be a little bit confusing, so I'm going to try to clarify it for you. So this is a basic template of how each of these fields would look and how it wants you to manipulate this data, and we're going to make it look exactly like this. So this is telling you, okay, you want the ECU.type, for example, ECU.ESP or EPS or engine, forward radar, etc. And then you're going to convert this address here to hex. And so if you go to this link here for decimal to hex converter, okay, it'll take you here, and you can see I've already done this to make it a little bit simplified. So you can just copy and paste that in the decimal format and then hit convert, and now you have your hex number. And then the next field is 0x sub address converted to hex. So if you have a sub address, it'll be something other than 0. Okay, if it says sub address equals 0, you don't have a sub address, and all you have to do is put none in the next field. And so that's kind of what this is saying here, none if 0. So as you can see, I've already gone ahead and done that. So I've done ECU.ESP for ESP, 0x 7B0, which is 1968 converted. So the 0x is going to be there in front of all of the addresses once they're converted to hex by default. Okay, you have to put that in there by default. And 1968 converted to hex is 7B0. And I don't have a sub address, so I put none in there. And then underneath of that, you have B, single quotation, and the firmware version. All right, so you can just copy and paste that right there. Okay, so those are the only fields I have for that firmware of that device, for the ESP device, and I have to modify each of these fields to make it look like this respectfully. So that's how I pre-modify it, this file, in order to get my firmware versions to plug into the configuration file when I'm ready to. Okay, so that's the first step. So besides the firmware information and addresses, we also need the physical fingerprint for the identifier of the car's computer. And in order to do that, if you scroll down from Fingerprint 2.0, you have to go to Fingerprinting 1.0, creating the Fingerprint 1.0 deprecated. And we're going to get a file or some data that looks like this. And we need that for later so we can modify the correct file for the Comma2. Now Fingerprinting 2.0 doesn't have directions on how to pull that down, and as far as I know, and my experience using Comma2, my car was not recognized unless I had both the ECU firmwares that we just pulled down and the physical fingerprint itself in the values.py folder, in the values.py file. So we're going to go through this step just so I can show you how to plug it in just in case. Alright, so make sure your car is turned off and make sure that it's physically plugged in properly. and then we're going to go to an SSH session. Now, I use Putty. Putty is a good application I like to use on Windows. So it makes it easy. I have a saved profile. If I load that profile up, you can see it comes up with my predefined IP address and the proper port for SSH for the Comma2. That's pre-configured for this port. This is not the default port for SSH. Default port is 22. As you can see, the Comma2 AI team has changed the default port. So if you're trying to go default port 22 on SSH, for example, let me just open this back up. Okay, you can see default, it goes to port 22. When I load Comma2, it goes to 8022. So it saves predefined profiles for me, so I can just click on it and open it up. It takes me right to my Comma2. The other reason I like it is because it has logging. So for that, I go to session logging. I will log all session output radio button, and I'll create a file location. I have this one saved in my desktop, and then I just select it to always override it, so it creates a new log file every time I start an SSH session underneath of this profile for the Comma2. Okay, and I'll open this up. All right, and so we're going to run these two commands in step 3 underneath of create fingerprint 1.0. And the cool thing about this is that you can just highlight that, copy it, and you can left click on there and it'll just paste it right into your session. And so that's going to start that. And as you're doing this, you want to create another Putty session. Okay, and for this one, we're going to copy this one, which is going to run the get fingerprint py file. And same thing, we're just going to copy it, and we're going to paste it in there, and we're going to run that guy. Okay, so now it's running. The next step is that we have to turn on the car. So I'm lucky enough I have a remote start on my car, so I'm going to go ahead and start the car. Okay, so that right there is the fingerprint coming up for the car, and then I'm going to go ahead and that's all I need, so I'm going to stop it. Okay, so pulled the fingerprint down, that's good. I'm going to stop both of these. And then I'll control C that guy and exit out of the session. Alright, so now if I open up my puttycm2.log, alright, so I'm going to go down and you can see that these are all the same. Okay, it's just repeating the same fingerprint over and over again. Okay, so what you want is from after it says fingerprint, you want the first number, 36, all the way down to the last number, without any white space before or after that highlighted area. And you're just going to copy it, and you can paste that right into the same file where we have the ECU firmware, because we're going to use that later as well. And it'll look something like this. So this is all the information that we need to modify the values.py folder on the Comma2. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do that. All right, so we're back to add new firmware versions. All right, so in step 4 of fingerprinting 2.0, it actually tells you what the file is that you need to modify. So it says SSH in the Comma2, navigate to /data/openpilot/self-drive/car/car make, and there should be a directory for your specific make of car, and underneath of that directory there should be a values.py file. So I'm going to open up Comma2 again on the putty, and I'm going to go to /data/openpilot self-drive/car. My car is a Toyota, and if I list, you can see right here that there's a values.py. Alright, so there's a couple ways that we can modify the values.py. You can either do a secure copy, which uses the SSH protocol to copy files from another network device to another network device, and vice versa. Or you can actually modify the file directly through the SSH session using the Comma2's VI application text editor that's built into Linux. All right, so I'll show you both ways of how to do that. They're both useful depending on how you're going to what you need to do. So the command line is vi and values.py. So one word of caution that I'll say about VI is that it is completely command line based. Okay, you can't use your mouse to navigate around. The only thing you can do is use command line hotkeys in order to move around and edit. But this does allow me to copy and paste from a text file that's on my desktop or somewhere else on my computer into the SSH session directly through the SSH session into VI. So I'm going to go ahead and open these up so we can see both of these windows side by side, because we're going to need both of these. Okay, so when you first open up the values.py folder, on line 15, it has a legend. So whatever car that you select, you want to make sure that you're changing the fingerprint field for that car and also the firmware versions for that car. And so, for example, right, it has class car. Okay, it's going to tell you first of all what these car variables equal out to in what your actual car is. So, for example, I have a hybrid Toyota RAV4. Okay, so the closest one that I have to my car is this 2019 Toyota RAV4 hybrid. So I'm going to be modifying the RAV4H_TSS2. All right, and so if I scroll down in the file, so the first major fields that you'll see that are very similar to what we just pulled down are the actual fingerprint fields. All right, so I'm looking for the car. Let's see. So I'm looking for RAV4H_TSS2. So just be careful because so the first one you can see is car.rav4, but it's not, and it looks similar to what I want to modify, but it's not the RAV4H_TSS2. So I'm looking for RAV4H_TSS2 as my car. So if I scroll down, oh, okay. Okay, there I just saw it. Okay, so you're gonna have car dot rav4h underscore tss2. So you can see this is rav4h tss2. This is the one I want to modify. And so what you can do is in your text file, highlight the fingerprint itself, right click and copy. Now if you're going back into VI on the SSH session, click the mouse in front of the line of the first line there, and if you hit D twice, it's going to erase that whole field. All right, and so once you've done that, now you can do a Shift P, and it's going to copy the data that you just copied, or it's going to paste the data that you just copied from your text file. And so one thing that's very important, these separator identifiers here, okay, so you have your brackets here, okay, these have to stay consistent because these separate all the different fields. So if you delete them, or if you delete one, or if you delete a comma, it's not going to work right because it's going to pair all of this information. The software is going to think that the next field is also part of your fingerprint. So you just want to make sure that you keep all of these brackets exactly how they are. So you have the open bracket, the closed bracket, the comma, all those stay the same. Okay, the next thing that you want to verify is you don't have any white space as you copied, right? So if you want to do that, okay, you can just hit delete and then hit I to input, and then you can space again, and that's just to line it up. It will still read it if you don't have any spaces, and then if you hit escape again, it's going to take you back to the end of that, back out of edit mode. Okay, so we just copied our fingerprint to car.rav4h underscore tss2. All right, so the next thing we want to do is modify our firmware. Okay, so we need to find, again, the next major section that we see is the actual firmware sections. And so it starts with cart.camry, car.avalon, so on and so forth. Now, one thing I'll say is that on line 287, it does say don't use these fingerprints for fingerprinting. They are still needed for ECU detection. And it says ignored fingerprints, car.rav4h underscore tss2. So the programming is telling the software, hey, don't pay attention to this fingerprint up here, only pay attention to firmware. However, I have not had my Comma2 successfully identify my vehicle unless that fingerprint was in there. I'm not a programmer, but so I don't know exactly what the different functions and different files are looking for underneath the value.py, but that's where I've had success, is that I find the closest make of car and I overwrite the values, at least for the fingerprint portion, and then I add the ECU lines to the already existing ECUs for the different makes of vehicles. So if we go down to the ECUs, I'm going to find again rav4h.tss2. And it's pretty far down. It's like line 1000 for mine. Okay, here we go. So car.rav4h underscore tss2. And so we're just going to go we're going to match up exactly what it says based off the address. So the first ECU is engine, all right, and so we can see ECU engine 0x700 none. So we already have an entry here for the RAV4H underscore TSS2, all right, which is our car. All right, so the main thing we only need to add is make sure that we have the proper address. And so we want to make sure that this is in here. So if we look, we can see that mine is already in there, all right? But if it's not, all you have to do is add it in here. So using the same method, and I'll just show you real quick, we're just gonna highlight this, okay? And you wanna copy everything from the B over to the comma, again, making sure that there's no white space before or after. Copy it, and I'm gonna come over here. I'm just gonna delete my existing ECU for this example. So hit escape just to make sure that you're outside of edit mode. Put the cursor in front of the line you want to delete and hit D twice. Okay, that deletes that line. And then since we've already copied the line that we want, the instructions say to put your ECU firmware at the top of the list. They put it at the bottom of mine, so it doesn't really matter. I think that's just for them to keep track of the sorting. But I'm just going to do a Shift P, and you can see it copied it into the VI. Okay, and we're just going to go through each of the different ECU fields. All right, so the next one is ECU ESP 0x7B0. Okay, and we have ECU ESP 0x7B0. Okay, and my firmware version, going off the last four, is the easiest for me to identify, is 2521. So I have 2521 right here. All right, so 152.642.521, 152.642.521. Okay, so mine is already in there. All right. Now the next one is ECU EPS 0x7A1. ECU EPS 0x7A1. Okay, and same thing, 2181 and 2181. Okay, so that one is there. ECU forward radar 0x750, 0x750, 1400, 1400. So that one is already there. And the last one is forward camera, X750, X750, and I'm looking for 3700, and 3700 is there. Okay, so my fingerprint has been modified to car.rav4h_tss2, and all my ECU identifiers have been added for all the firmware components for my car to the firmware version of the values.py for car.rav4h_tss2 as well. All right, so everything's been added to the values.py folder. So in order to save it from VI, you hit escape. Okay, make sure that you're outside of edit mode, and you're gonna hit Shift:, WQ, so that's write and quit, and then execute with a bang. All right, and then you're gonna hit enter, and you just save your values.py folder. So before we reboot the Comma2 to see if the settings have taken effect and to see if the Comma2 now recognizes your car, there's just a couple things I want to talk about before we do that, just to make sure that you don't have to do this again. All right, as it stands, if you don't make a copy of the values.py file, and if you get an update to your openpilot system, it's going to overwrite your values.py. So if you didn't update that through a push request through GitHub, or copy that values.py folder over to a different directory that's not being overwritten, then you're going to have to go through this process again, because Comma AI doesn't have that data. All right, so if you go back to the wiki on fingerprinting, going down all the way to add your car to future openpilot release. So this is a more permanent solution. You want to fork your openpilot into GitHub account. I'm not going to talk about that in this video. However, if you want me to create a separate video for that, just let me know in the comments below. However, I will talk about how to just create a copy of that file, which is much easier. All right, so the directory that is overwritten is the data openpilot. So anytime you get an openpilot release, this gets overwritten. So what we want to do is we want to copy the values.py over to a different directory, and what I've done is I've copied it to the data directory. All right, so that's real easy to do. All you have to do is cp values.py from the directory, of course, where the values.py is located, since you're already there. Or if you're not there, then you probably want to use the full naming convention of that file. So for example, if I'm in root, okay, you want to do cp data openpilot self-drive car make values.py, and then you want to use a full naming convention again to where you want to put that destination. So in this case, I want to just put it in the data folder, and I'm going to call it values.py, and you can put anything else in there to differentiate what that file is. So you can put a date, you can just put backup or BAK for backup. It's up to you what you want to do. Just recommend use your naming convention of what you're comfortable with, so you know in the future if you need a copy from that file, you know which one it is. And just hit enter. And so if I go cd/data and I list it, you can see I have a values.py.back. I have different files in here for values.py. I've done this already a couple times for different variants of openpilot. So if you do get a openpilot update, and you'll know right away because you go to your car, you turn it on, and the first thing you see on your openpilot screen is unsupported car, dash cam mode only. So you'll just SSH back into your Comma2, and you're just gonna so by default it'll be your SSH session will be in the /data/openpilot. Okay, so you can do a copy /data/values.py.back, and you can just put it to the destination of /data/openpilot /self-drive/car /make of car, in this case Toyota, and you'll rename it to values.py, and it just overwrote it. So that would be the easiest way. If you don't feel comfortable with creating push commands, you don't know GitHub very well, and you don't understand their file mechanisms and organizational structure on how to create pushes and pulls and clones. If that doesn't make any sense to you, the best recommendation I can tell you is just to make a copy of the values.py within your Comma2 to the data directory, and then once you do have an openpilot update, which will overwrite the values.py folder, now you have a backup so that you can restore that values.py and your car is recognized again by the Comma2. All right, so that was the VI method of how you would want to pull your data and modify it and save it within the command line of an SSH session on PuTTY. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is show you how to just copy the values.py file from your Comma2 to your computer without copying and pasting through an SSH session, and then upload it back to your Comma2. And I'm going to use the SCP. So what you need to do in order to do that, if you go to your start menu in Windows and type command, bring up a command prompt. And in this session, okay, the syntax is SCP TAC-I. And what TAC-I does is it tells SCP where the RSA certificate is so that you can authenticate with the Comma2. By default, it's in the user directory.ssh folder. So if you're already starting in a Windows session under users and your home directory, all you have to do is type .ssh, and by default, if you're using PuTTY, it's IDS_RSA. The next switch that you want to use is TAC uppercase P, because we need to modify the port for SSH. If you don't use the TAC uppercase P switch, it's going to default to SSH port 22, and you're going to get rejected connection. Okay, next thing you're going to do is where you're going to pull that file from. So the source of that file. All right, in this case, you have to tell the SCP session not only the destination but also the username that you're logging into to the destination device. So in this case, it's root at the IP address of the Comma2, and this is going to be independent to your own network depending on what your Comma2 is pulled for IP address through DHCP. Okay, and then we're just going to put in, with no spaces, a colon slash for root, and then data values. All right, excuse me. You can either pull your backup file, which you just copied, or you can go to the actual values.py file that you want to pull and modify. So in this case, the full naming convention is going to be data openpilot self-drive car Toyota values.py, and then space, and then you want to put the destination of where you want to save that file. So in this case, C:\/ users, my username, and my desktop. And then I'm going to call this values.py from Comma2. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just using this so I know that that is from my comma. And you hit enter. And you can see that it copied the values.py, 100% speed. It was a very small file, so it pulled it very quickly. And if I close all these out, I should have a values.py on my desktop. Sort by name. There we go. Values.py from comma. And there we go. And so you can see it's the same data. So now you can modify the file directly on your desktop in a notepad, and you're going to do the same thing. You're going to find the same car profile, and you're going to modify the appropriate settings of how I showed you through the VI version of how to modify the file. So for example, scrolling down to car.rav4h_tss2, this one right here, you can see that's my fingerprint. So now I could just copy from the original notepad I had and paste directly into it, and then I can do the same thing with the ECU firmware. One thing for notepad, it does tell you the line numbers here at the bottom of the screen. So if you knew where the line number was in VI, you can go right to that spot. It makes it a whole lot easier. So you just have to click in the spot. It doesn't update as you scroll down. You have to click as you go down to find out where you're at. So I want to go to about line 1000 and change, and there I am. Okay, and you can see W5000. So you could do the same thing, copy and paste directly into it, and then you're just going to save it. Okay. All right, now that you've modified the file and you've saved it, now you can go back into your command window, and you're just going to reverse the syntax of how you connected to it and pulled it down. Now you're going to upload it directly to the Comma2. So same thing, scp taci dot ssh IDS_RSA. Okay, that's your public key for your session. Okay, you're going to do tac-p for port 822, but this time we're going to do the destination is going to be the desktop. So C:\users username desktop values.py.from comma, and then the Comma2 is going to be the destination. So root at 192.168.1.118 : data openpilot self-drive car Toyota values.py. So you can see in the syntax, I'm actually changing the name of the source file to the destination file. So as I do this, it's going to change the values.py from comma to values.py and overwrite any other file that's there. It's not going to ask you. So it's very important that you have your syntax correct, that you haven't made any typos. So before you hit enter, just take a little bit of time to make sure that you've verified your syntax and that things are correct. Now on the Windows syntax, it's not going to care if you have a / or a /. It automatically compensates for that in the operating system. On the Linux side, you want to have a right-leaning slash, or a / as I call it, because that's how Linux file structure is set up. It's not going to recognize a / like Windows uses. Okay. Once you've verified that your syntax is correct, hit enter, and it just copied it over. And so if you want to verify it, go back into a PuTTY session. And I still have my window open, so I'm going to go back into self-drive car Toyota, and you can see I have a values py there, and you can so there's a couple ways you can view it too. All right, you don't have to VI it. If you don't want to take the chance of accidentally modifying that file again, you can use the more command just to read it, or you can use tail, or you can use a couple different things, but you can just use more values.py. Okay, and just hit the space bar to go through, and it'll stop after every page refreshes. And so you scroll down, just want to verify your data and make sure that it actually saved your data and updated it properly. And we can see that it did. Alright, and then if you don't want to go all the way to the end, you can just hit Q for quit, and it'll take you back to the directory syntax of the SSH. And then hit exit, or if you want to go ahead and reboot, just type reboot. Okay, now one thing I'll recommend, once you hit reboot, opening up a Tmux A once it reboots enough to where it starts the operating system. So you're going to have to just hit OK to cancel out that, open up another SSH session. It's still not open. Okay, and then Tmux A. So Tmux A is a really good logging utility, especially good for troubleshooting. So it's going to go through the initial boot process. After it's done with the boot process, it'll tell you if it sees any errors, and I'll tell you here in a second. Okay, so once you get to this thermal D log message UI, that's normal. If you get any other error, it's going to continuously scroll, log buffer full, some other error, and you're not going to see this nice, continual scrolling screen of the same information. This will change once you turn on the car and turn it back off again. But I'm not going to do that. I know that it's working because it's not airing out. So once you do turn on the car, if all your data was correct, you pulled the data correctly, you didn't make any typos, you didn't have any white spaces you're copying over, you kept the variable structure with the open brackets, closed brackets, the commas, and then you saved it properly. Once you reboot the Comma2, it should come up as recognizing your car and coming up with the standard openpilot screen for being able to drive with openpilot. So that's all I have for this video. I hope it was helpful for you. If you liked it, put a like on hit that like button. If you have any comments on any other videos that you would like to see, let me know in the comment section. And with that being said, have a good day.